Vanessa from Crafty Gemini Creates here with a fun and functional little project for you. We are working on these really cute Easter baskets today. I'm using an Easter fabric. It's called a Joyful Easter. We're going to be using these 10-inch squares that have been cut down to the size of the basket that we want to make. But of course, as you can tell, these are great little storage baskets for all types of goodies. If you do use them and give them as gifts for Easter baskets, then after Easter's over and they use up all their goodies and stuff, they can always use it to store toys and other fun things around the kids' rooms and things like that. So I have two different sizes here. This one was made using 8.5-inch squares that we cut down from the 10 by 10s. And then this one is using 6.5-inch squares. So this is the one that we're actually going to be working on in the tutorial. But I wanted to show you the variety in size with just a few inches difference that you can customize these to make these as little or as big as you want. You just have to be consistent with the size of the squares that you're using. So let's jump into it and show you how it's done. The outer and the inner parts of the basket are created exactly the same. They're each going to require 5 squares. So here I have a sample and I've laid these out for you in the same orientation that I want you to lay them out in. I have 5 squares and these measure, like I said earlier, 6.5 inches by 6.5 inches. You're going to lay them kind of like as a capital T in a sideways shape. Now, I've used a few different fabrics here to orient them and show you kind of, if you know where you want to have what print, then you have to know where each chunk is going to go in the shape of the box. It's a little tricky, but I'll walk you through all the steps. These are going to be sides. So let me flip this over to kind of give you a better visual of how the box is going to come together. These are going to be the sides here. This one is going to be a bottom panel. See that? And then this one comes over. So that's how we end up getting kind of like an incomplete cube, okay? So let's flip this back. If you have your letter T this way, know that the next one over, that middle center block, is going to be the bottom. So if you have one specifically that you want to go there, go ahead and place it. That's why you see I have a different one. Now, if you notice, I have this blue bunny and chick print on opposite sides of this one. That means they're going to be on opposite sides of each other. And this pink one and this one will be on opposite sides of each other. So orient them that way. And then you can see how I've done it here. We have that blue print, the blue one, these are on opposite sides. And then these guys are on opposite sides as well. Okay, the same thing for the inside. I used one of the print fabrics that has text on it. And then I used this one, I put right here, the solid green. Okay, so keep that in mind. And once you start stitching them together, I think you'll better get a feel for how they come together. So we're going to cut out 5 squares for the outer. For the outer portion, to give it the stiffness in this body, we are using a product called InArtForm Plus. And if you watch my tutorials and you've seen me before, you probably know that I love to use this stuff. I'm using the one that's double-sided fusible. It also comes in a sew-in version and a one-sided fusible. Any will work for this project, okay? So let's move on. For the outer, we've cut our squares to 6.5 by 6.5. The chunks of InArtForm Plus that you need to cut out need to be 1 inch smaller. So if you look, this one measures 5.5 by 5.5, okay? And if you're using the double-sided fusible or the single-sided fusible one, I want you to head over to the sewing machine and fuse it from the fabric side so that it adheres to it, okay? And I have a sample here to show you. You see how all these have a chunk of the InArtForm? And notice what I did. We made them 1/2 inch smaller so that we clear the bulk of the foam stabilizer in the seam allowances. That's going to give you a nicer finish. Your edges and side seams here won't be bulky. Okay, that's a little bag making trick that we use. And then the bottom one has the same square as well. So adhere those 5 squares of InArtForm Plus or the one-sided. If you're doing a sew-in, then you're probably going to have to quilt it so that you can hold it in place, or you can even try to hit it with a temporary stabilizing spray or temporary adhesive spray. So complete that with the 5 squares for the outer. For the lining, you're going to do the same thing without the InArtForm Plus. So only 5 squares cut to the same size, the 6.5 inches square. So after we orient them this way, we can start to sew them up. And it helps if you've never made something like this before to do them one at a time. Okay, I'm going to take off this tape so you can see. Here are these 3. I'm going to stitch them up together to make one full row. So I'm going to fold this one here, pretty sides touching, and we're using a 1/2 inch seam allowance. So let's head over to the sewing machine. Let me move my needle position over so I can get my 1/2 inch seam allowance. And you want to press those seams open. I'm not going to do it right now, but go ahead, and hit it with your iron and press those seams open, okay? So there's one. I'm going to sew the next one on, and I'm going to show you how we add the next one in there, because it doesn't have a seam allowance, or the seam allowance gets sewn in here. So it may look a little bit tricky for you to figure out when you first do it. Okay, so if we have this like this, now I would sew these two together, okay, just as a simple strip like we did here. And now let's pretend that that's together. We're going to bring this one over here. And what I do, if you notice, is you'll have to span the seam allowance. So don't try to start it on one edge because you'll get extra here. Split it so that you account for that 1/2 inch seam allowance on each side. Does that make sense? I hope so. We'll put a little clip right here. And we're going to stitch just a few stitches over the seam line that's going under and a few stitches over the seam line that's underneath it as well. The reason I don't go all the way across is because in the corners, once we start twisting things around to sew up the sides of the box, it's a little bit easier if you have that loose corner to turn the two pieces and make them match up. And I'm going to take a back stitch there. And I'm obviously using a red thread so you all can see the stitch lines. So you can see how I don't go all the way to the edges. Okay? Goes this way. Let me just add this one on here so you all can see how we start to bring it together. Because I know if you've never made a 3-dimensional box like this using blocks sewn up together, it's better to have a visual for sure. All right, so once you have these 5 squares sewn up, this is how you're going to put them the same way that I showed you earlier. Lay it with the pretty sides up, and then you're going to start, okay? You're going to sew this side to this side of this block, this one to this one, and you're just going to turn it and make it fit. If you need to snip your fabric, go ahead and do that. Let me grab a pair of scissors here. That's why I take a few back stitches there to secure the stitches so it won't come completely apart. But you just basically want to open it up a little bit. See how I have that? To make that seam come over, match it up on the side as best you can. And then you're going to stitch down here, again, going just 1 or 2 stitches past the seam line underneath. So you're basically leaving the 1/2 inch seam allowance open here because that opens up the corner and allows you to turn them a little bit better like this. So I'm going to do this one just so you can see how it starts to come up. And the same thing we're doing here for this lining one, you would repeat it with the outer fabric that has the inner form in it. And you can see how it's starting to come together, okay? It looks a little bit weird, but once you have it in your hand, there's really no other place that you can go with the blocks other than where they need to go. So like this one is flapping around. If I bring it here, you can already start to see that that's going to be a side. And then what you have left over is this one. So just continue to stitch them up like that, and you'll end up with the box square bottom of your basket. Again, repeat it for your lining and your outer fabrics, okay? Once you have that done, let me actually stitch this last one up. You can see when you get to the last seam, it's quite easy. Just fold everything, make it fit, and you're going to stitch all the way across using that 1/2 inch seam allowance. And the smaller you make this box, the harder it's going to be to stitch these sides up. So keep that in mind, especially to get it under here and to drape it in over your sewing machine. But there we have it. Now I'm going to take the lining fabric and flip it so that it's right sides out. This one you can leave with the inner form facing out. And you can give it a good press at this point. I starched this really good, so I think I'll be fine to keep moving on without pressing it. and I had pressed my seams open on that. You're going to take one, which is your lining, and place it inside the outer fabric here so that the pretty sides of both boxes are touching. Easy peasy, okay? You're going to match up the side seams on both and put your clips. Then we're going to set this aside. I'm going to show you how to make the handles. If you don't want to add handles to it, then you could just move on to the next step. But if you do want to add the handles to it, make it more of a basket instead of just kind of like a container little box, then I'm going to show you how to do that. Whoops, now. If your seams are pretty consistent, everything will match up nicely, okay? So let's set that aside. For the strap, we are using those 10-inch squares of this little Easter fabric. So I just cut out a strip that measures 2 3/4 wide by the 10 inches, okay? And from one square, obviously, you can cut out enough for 2 of those. You are gonna press under the long edges under to the wrong side of the fabric by 1/4 inch on both sides. And then we've cut out a strip of the InArtForm Plus that measures 3/4 inch wide by the 10 inches. And this just gets sandwiched in here, and you close it up so you have no raw edges, and then just put some clips, and you're gonna head over to the sewing machine and stitch it closed along that open side. And then I always top stitch a few more lines just to give it a little bit more texture, so you can do that, okay? Once you do that, actually let me do this one so I can show you how to insert it in here. I'm using a red thread here. It's not gonna match, but it's no big deal. You always can match your threads. Now for constructing bags and things like this that are gonna probably get some weight put on them, I recommend using a stronger thread, maybe an all-purpose polyester thread, or maybe something like a 40 weight cotton would work nicely, which is what I'm using here. I wouldn't really use like a really lightweight quilting thread, like a piecing thread, not for the sides of the construction of the bag at least. All right, so we have our other strap here. For the straps, I like to insert them now after I've already inserted the lining. You're basically just gonna fold this to create some type of a loop, and you're going to eyeball it on the sides that you want it to be on. So just pick 2 opposite sides, okay? And I think I'm gonna put these here. I'm just gonna slip it in between. Make sure that you don't have a twist in your handles. And the sides are not that big. Technically, you can go measure it and find the center point, but I usually will just eyeball the distance from where I'm starting it to the edge. And that looks pretty good to me. Then I'll add the lining back in and clip through all the layers. Go to the opposite side of it and repeat it. And usually you can even just look across the top there to get a pretty accurate measurement. All right, so now the next step is to stitch around the top part here, but you wanna make sure that you're leaving an opening. And because we have the handles on these 2 opposite sides, I would recommend leaving the opening on one of the sides that doesn't have the handle. That's gonna make it a lot easier for you to flip it out through. So I'm gonna start on one of the blank sides here. Start really kind of close to the outside edge, so you give yourself at least a good 4 inches to flip the whole thing right side out, because remember, we have the bulk of all those squares of InArtForm Plus. If you only leave yourself a 2-inch hole, you're not going to be able to flip it out through there, okay? So start close to the edge on both sides to give yourself a nice open space, and then stitch all the way around. Now to stitch all the way around, because it's kind of tight, even if you use the 6.5-inch squares, I recommend exposing the free arm on your machine and stitching it up from the outside, so you can drape this over your machine this way. If you tried to do it this way, depending on the big head part here of your machine, it may or may not be easy enough for you to get through the whole thing, okay? So try to do it like you would a sleeve or a cuff and kind of just squish it down this way. All right. And again, using that 1/2 inch seam allowance. Back stitch, of course, at the beginning and at the ends, because when we flip it, we'll put some stress on that seam. You don't want it to rip apart on you. Okay, so here we go. We've started here and here. The next step is to carefully reach in here. It usually helps to like grab the corners first, and it's gonna take a little bit of work, but just work the whole thing out when it's right side out. Then all you need to do is push the lining. The lining is gonna come all the way out. You're gonna push it into the box or into the basket. And then the last step to finish off your basket is to fold in the seam allowance of your opening and top stitch all the way around the entire top edge of your basket, and then it's complete. I hope you all enjoyed this video tutorial and that you will give it a try. Remember that we include a link in the description box below the video on where you can find the Interform Plus and the cute Easter fabric that I used to create this project. If you give the project a try, make sure to snap some pictures. You can post them right on our Crafty Gemini Creates Facebook page so we can see what you're making. And if you enjoyed this tutorial, hit it with the thumbs up below, and remember to share it across the different social media sites. Also, click the subscribe button so you won't miss out on any of my future videos. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.